Welcome back to another video on my channel. And the last video I completed was on spinning reels. And today I want to talk about bait casting reels. Now, you might be wondering why I have this adjustable wrench on this bait caster. Well, there's a really good reason. Can you think of what that reason is? Well, did you guess what the reason was? Well, let's take that same adjustable wrench and, oh wait, it's now in a different position. And yet, this adjustable wrench is a great tool because I can use it for a whole bunch of different jobs. It's never the same. And there's an analogy here that you need to keep in mind. A bait casting reel is just like this adjustable wrench. I have to change it, and this brake here is the main way that I change how to adjust this bait casting reel. So I want you to pay careful attention in this video, because if you've struggled with a bait caster before, hopefully I'm going to help you get it right so that you are going to minimize those number of backlashes and quite possibly eliminate them altogether. So stay tuned, and if you like this video, a like, share, subscribe is always very much appreciated. With over 30 years experience, I've worked a lot of fishing shows, I've worked in-store promotions, and I've learned a lot about, how people look at bait casters. And there's a lot of people who have a pretty negative outlook on bait casting reels, yet they are amazing tools. There's a reason why you see pro anglers using them in tournaments all the time. They are very accurate in casting. They handle weights generally a 1/4 ounce and above, and they handle heavy line great. So you can use 20-pound fluorocarbon, which I use all the time on my bait casters. You can handle 65-pound braid for heavy flipping conditions. There's all kinds of heavy line choices that work great on a bait caster just by the nature of the way the line comes off the spool. You wouldn't want to put 20-pound fluorocarbon on a spinning reel because it's simply just not going to perform. 20-pound monofilament is not going to perform well on a standard size spinning reel. So you've got to keep in mind that the bait casters are just awesome reels, but you gotta learn how to use them. And that's why I want you to get rid of that set it and forget it mentality, because it doesn't work. You need to bring this adjustable wrench analogy into play, because conditions are always changing on the water. It could be windy one day, calm the next. The job has changed. Therefore, the adjustable wrench will have to be changed. You could go from a big worm weight, for example, this 1 ounce worm weight here, and there it goes, it's just fallen out. If I go to put this 3/16 in, there's no way that 3/16 is going to stay in this adjustable wrench. But if I adjust it to a setting where it's going to grab, and think of this adjustable wrench like the brakes on your bait casting reel, now it works perfectly fine. And that's what you have to take out of this, that you need to be prepared to adjust those brakes for the conditions that you are facing. And those conditions can change from hour to hour, day to day. But bottom line, get rid of that set it and forget it mentality. A lot of people with their electronics, it's the same thing. Oh, what setting do I use so that I can just leave it there? That's a mistake in your thinking, because there isn't one setting for all conditions. So as soon as you adopt that mentality with the bait casting reel, you are well ahead of the game. You know you are ahead of the game when you understand that a bait casting reel is like an adjustable wrench, and that you are going to have to constantly adjust it. So let's take a closer look at the adjustments. if I am looking at this bait casting setup, I have a nice big 3/4 1 ounce spinnerbait size here, and it's very different than throwing a 1/4 ounce spinnerbait. This bait that's made by my buddy Don Jeremy, that we affectionately call a dinner bait, is quite heavy, and I need to take my brakes. And when I look at the reel here, I'm just going to get this handle out of the way here a little bit. My drag's pretty loose right now because I've got it stored for the winter, but right here is the brake. And because this is a heavy spinnerbait, then I need to take that brake and I need to tighten it up and adjust it so that as that spool is revolving freely, it's not going to load up and just release and just make that awful bird's nest. So I have to tighten it up quite a bit. If I were using a 1/4 ounce spinnerbait, I would need to loosen it up a bit to get some distance. So I have to constantly play with it. Those of you that are familiar with stereos and tuning, sometimes there is a master tuner and then there is a fine tuning adjustment, so that once you get it close to dialing in the station, you can just tweak it a little bit more so you get the station perfectly dialed in. If you think about the brakes the same way, this is like your master brake, and over here this is like a fine tuning brake. And what you're going to do is you're going to get it set pretty close with the master brake, and you are going to, you know, typically have the bait slowly fall off the end of the rod, and you'll have a lot of people demonstrate that to you in the stores and when you're first learning. But there's also over here, there is a setting that is at the max. And for that fine tuning, I like to actually set it about halfway from the max point. And then during the course of a day, if there's little minor adjustments, let's say the wind picks up a little, then I can add a little bit more tension. Or if the wind has died down a little bit and I feel I can get a little bit more distance, then I can loosen off the tension a little bit. And it's just that precise fine tuning. But keep in mind, the majority of your adjustments are going to be made with this. This 5-pronged thing here is your drag, and if you're using heavier line, most of the time we're just going to winch that down nice and tight so that we can get that fish's head up and out of the cover as quickly and efficiently as possible. So those are your main adjustments on a bait casting reel: the brake, the star drag, and the fine-tune adjustment for the brakes. Once you have those in mind, then it's just a matter of dialing them in so that you become more proficient with the use of a bait caster. For those of you who have never operated a bait casting reel before, it works on a thumb release. And when I release the bar, which is right here, I will put my thumb on the spool. And an educated thumb is still your best defense against any backlashes or so-called professional overruns, because the spool, as you can see, is a free revolving spool. And the only way to stop it is the lure hitting the water or stopping it with your thumb. It is also very important to understand that when the free spool is revolving, a click of the reel handle will stop it. And that is super important to know, because on the hook set, if you don't engage the reel and stop this spool from spinning and you set the hook, you are going to get one nasty backlash, because the force of that hook set is going to cause this to go super quick, and the line's not going out anywhere other than just causing this spool to revolve, and that will be one really ugly, nasty bird's nest. So always engage the reel before you set the hook. You want to also understand that the wind, if you are casting into a wind, can slow down your bait enough so that if the spool is revolving too quickly,
and the wind hits it and stops it, and you haven't stopped it with your thumb, then you can also get a bird's nest that way. So you tighten up the brakes. So right now, just in that little break between clips, I tightened up the brake. And now with the button pushed, you'll see when I push this that it is no longer a free revolving spool. There are brakes on it to slow it down. And that is what is going to help you avoid getting a bird's nest. Keeping your brakes adjusted properly and stopping, so as the bait's going out and the spool's going out, your thumb is just slightly off the spool, and then as the bait is getting near to your target, once it is just at the target, as close as you feel comfortable, then you stop it by pushing your thumb down onto the spool. And that is what controls the professional overrun or the proverbial bird's nest.
The traditional way of testing your brakes is to hit the thumb release and let it go, keeping your thumb slightly above it, and gradually release the brakes. And there it is falling slowly. And that's what you want it to do. And that's what most people recommend. However, I'm going to suggest to you, because there is momentum on the cast, is that you actually start it a little bit tighter than that. So now, if I shake it, then I can get it to drop. And I want it to have a little bit of tension, so now as I shake it, it slowly drops, and that is much better. So that is what I recommend for you when you are setting your brakes initially with a bait casting reel. My general rule of thumb when you are learning how to use a new bait caster is to start with the brakes too tight. It's always better to start with them too tight as opposed to too loose. All right, so I have a practice casting plug. It's actually about a 1/2 ounce jig, and I've just tied into the eye. I've cut the hook off and just put some electrical tape around it just for insulation, as I'm going to try and practice by getting this into the cup. So basically I'm going to start with it tighter, and then I'm going to work at a short distance and then gradually increase my distance. So I hit the thumb release, and then I'm going to just let it come out, and you can see I just missed there. And then, you just kind of keep working it until you get the range, and there we go, we got one in. Just so you can see up close and a little bit better what actually happens with the thumb. So I need to get some momentum going, and you saw me in the previous video where I loaded it up by holding the plug in my hand. I'm just going to swing it now for some momentum. So I'm going to bring my thumb into focus. Now I use the thumb, so now I've engaged it, and I still have my thumb on the spool because otherwise it would be dropping down to the ground. So now as I swing it forward, I'm going to let it go. I release my thumb, and then I stop it just before it goes towards the cup. So that educated thumb is what prevents the bird's nest, and you need to work on educating the thumb, stopping it just before it gets to the target. And that's the whole purpose of using the cup that you see in the distance, is that I'm educating my thumb when to stop the bait, and that is the major key to using a bait casting reel effectively. I am left-handed, so therefore my throwing accuracy is best with my left hand. And when I engage the spool and I cast it out, I prefer to reel in with my right hand, because if I happen to get a bite, let's say I was fishing a frog in some slop, and I threw it out and the bait landed, and I clicked the reel over right away so that it is engaged, then if that fish hit that frog as soon as it landed on top of the slop, I could set the hook without worrying about getting a backlash. If you are a right-handed person, I would recommend that you get a left-handed bait casting reel, but there are some people who prefer to take it, and if, for example, if I'm left-handed, I would sit there, I'd cast out with my left hand, and then I would switch, and then I would reel with my left hand. But to me, that's inefficient, and that's not something that I want to do. But it's a totally personal preference as to what you would like to do. So in summary, lefties get a right-handed bait casting reel, righties get a left-handed bait casting reel, and I think for the majority of you, you will be happy with that decision. When you go to spool up your bait casting reel, you want to feed it through the guides and then come down through, and I have gone through the little hole at the front, and then I go under the spool and I take a pick and I bring the line up, and now I'm going to use the pick again, and I'm going to bring the line from here, and now I have the two lines here. They're in my hand and they're both ready to tie, and I'm going to do an arbor knot. The arbor knot is a very simple knot to tie. It's A-R-B-O-R. You can look it up. It's not complicated. You basically are just going to do a little overhand knot, and then you can cinch that up a little bit. And then what you're going to do is take another knot in the tag end, and I've made that, and I'm going to just pull that tight, and I'm going to snip it off now because it's a little bit easier. And I snip it off, and then I just pull on the main line, and hopefully you can see that, and it's just going to snug up. And whenever you are putting a new set of line on, that's generally on Baitcasters how you're going to do it. But specifically, if you are planning on putting braid on, always make sure that you put on some backing of monofilament or fluorocarbon so that the braid grabs. Lots of people have had issues with putting braid on and no backing, and then the reel just continuously spins. So always make sure that you add that backing. In this particular case, I am going to use straight fluorocarbon 20-pound test on my Baitcaster, and I'm just going to load it up from the spool, and that's it. The arbor knot is the way to go. If I were spooling up a spinning reel, then I would take the line coming off the top, because that's the basic way it goes onto a spinning reel. But a bait casting reel is different. In this case, I'm using 20-pound trilene 100% fluorocarbon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the box because it will stay in there. And then as I go to spool it, I'm just simply going to spool it. And that way my line spool is being controlled, and I will keep some tension as I am retrieving it with my fingers so that it goes onto the bait casting reel nice and smooth. And that's the basics of loading up a reel with line. And I know a lot of people get it done at the store, but it's very simple to do at home. Notice that the line is coming off the spool just the way it would come off a bait casting reel. And as I say, it's very quick and simple to do. And try and fill it up so that it's within 1/8 of an inch of the top of the spool. Let's take a quick peek at the spool. So you can see here that there is a little bit of silver here, and then there was a black coloration here. And I went up to the top, the black, and I still got about 1/8 of an inch there from where the spool actually joins in. So that gives you a rough idea. And having a full spool is going to give you a little bit more casting distance too. Thank you for watching this video on bait casting reel basics for beginners. I invite your questions and comments, and I will get back to them as quickly as possible. And as always, if you find the video enjoyable or helpful, a like, share, subscribe is always very much appreciated. Take care, and bye for now.